Hey bead friends, it's Lauren Harpster. I am the designer, author, and instructor here at Bead and Blossom, where I am teaching the art of French beaded flowers. Currently, we're working through my intermediate technique series where we are learning how to alter and build on top of the techniques that I taught in my beginner course. I am going to be assuming that you're already familiar with the techniques in my beginner course, so if you are not, I will have a link to that playlist in the description below. I'll also have a link to where you can download a free PDF packet for the intermediate techniques from my website. In this lesson, we're going to be learning about the split basic frame, which allows you to make 2 or 3 petals all on one single length of wire. As the name suggests, this technique is derived from the original basic frame technique that I taught in my beginner course, and I am going to assume that you are already familiar with the basic frame. Now, there are 2 different varieties of split basic. There is a double split basic, which allows you to make 2 petals on a single length of wire, and then there is triple split, which allows you to make 3, and I'm going to demonstrate both of them. For this sample pattern, we're going to be working with the double split basic first to make 2 5-row basic frames with 10 bead basic rows, round bottom, pointed top. Alright, so to set up the frame for a double split basic, we're going to count out the beads we need for our basic row and slide those up to the top. And then we're going to count out 10 more beads we need for the second basic row, and we're going to put those in the bottom loop. Now, our bottom loop does not need to be very long because that's actually going to end up being a top wire. So we're going to make it fairly short so we don't waste wire. And I'm only going to twist a few times there because I'm only making 5 rows. Okay, so we're going to focus on this one first. We're going to make 5 rows of basic frame up here, just like we normally would. And we're wrapping with a round bottom and pointed top. All right, and now I'm at the last row of my petal, so I'm going to double wrap that wire twice right around that bottom wire. For now, we are going to leave the working wire attached because we're going to need it to make the second petal. But what we are going to do is we're going to cut open this bottom loop. Just the same way as if we were reducing to 1 bottom wire on a basic frame. We're going to cut it open right there where the working wire is tied off, and then open it up. All right, and then make a little loop in the top of that wire. Okay, now this is going to be the basic row of our second petal. Now what we need to do is to make the bottom wire, and we're going to do that by twisting the working wire together with this wire below the second basic frame. And we only need to twist up a few times because we only need 5 rows of beads. Okay, now here's where the way that I do it is a little bit different than the way that most people do it. Most people would have you bring your working wire over to the left side so that you can continue wrapping the same direction you did on the first leaf. And you definitely can do that. I'm going to show you that first, and then I'll come back and show you my way. All right, so I brought my working wire over to the left side of my basic row. Now the reason why I don't like this is because this second row of beads starts out behind the bottom wire instead of on top like it's supposed to. And then that row isn't completely flat and in line with the rest of the rows in the petal. Now, in a finished petal, in a finished flower, this might not be that big of a deal or not be that visible. So let me show you how to do that first. So you would just wrap this one the same way you did before. I'm wrapping clockwise around my basic row, and I'm going to make 5 more rows on this basic frame. All right, and then to finish off, you're just going to double wrap right there at the bottom of the last row. And then you should have just 1 single wire sticking out of the bottom, and that's going to be the stem wire for your unit that will help you to attach to your flower stem. And then you will cut both top wires and fold them to the back of your leaves. Alright, so here's that finished double split basic. As you can see, that second row there isn't completely in line with the rest of the rows in the petal. Now, some of you might be bothered by that, some of you might not. You probably won't notice in a finished flower. So that way is definitely a little bit easier. But let me show you another way if you want to be picky or meticulous about it. All right, so I've got a second one here worked up to the point where I'm about to twist that wire together. Now, we do have to twist our wire this way because of the direction that our wraps are on this first petal. If we were to twist the wire the opposite direction, we would end up unwrapping that last row of the first petal. So for this one, I'm actually just going to wrap the opposite direction as normally. So I had to twist those wires that direction so this doesn't come untwisted, but that means that my working wire is going to cross over the front, pointing to the right of the basic frame. And that is the situation where your rows are going to be all in line and that bottom wire is going to be completely covered by your rows, but you have to wrap the opposite direction in order to do that. So it feels a little funny, but it is doable. And the more you do it, the better you get at it, just like with regular basic frame. Anything really in French beading. Sometimes it always feels a little bit funny at the beginning, but the more you do, the less weird it feels. All right, and then I can double wrap at the bottom there. And I've got 2 basic frame petals all on one single length of wire. And all of my rows are flat and in line with each other. Just feels a little bit cleaner, but it is a little bit trickier to do. Right, so on quick glance, you can't really tell the difference between the two, but there's 2 ways to do it. Okay, now let's look at triple split. For the triple split basic sample pattern, we will be making 3 petals using 5 rows each and a 10 bead basic row with a round bottom and pointed top. All right, to set up a frame for a triple split basic, we're going to use those 10 beads we need for the basic row of our first petal up on the basic frame, just like normal. But then we are going to have 20 more beads, or enough for 2 more basic rows down in the bottom loop. And our bottom loop needs to be long enough to make 2 more basic rows. All right, so I'm going to wrap rows 2 through 5 with a round bottom and pointed top. Just like we were working with regular basic frame. Double wrap at the bottom of the petal. And what we're going to do here, if you have any twists in this wire, untwist it. And we're going to move 10 beads onto each half of the loop. And then we're going to cut it in half right up here. And then put a little loop in the end of each. And that will give us 2 more basic rows. And we're going to start with this one. All right, so I'm going to bring my wire between the 2 new basic rows, and I'm going to twist the wire together with the second basic row to make the bottom wire for that second petal. All right, so because I was able to bring it up between those 2 basic rows, so I was able to cross my working wire and twist it this direction so that my working wire come up above, on top of that basic row pointing this way, or bottom wire pointing that way. So I can just wrap normally and my rows will be all in line. Double wrap at the bottom of the petal. And then we're going to do this third one by bringing the working wire over to this side, the right side of that new basic row, and then twist together. Just a few times because we don't need our bottom wire to be very long. And you can, if you need to, you can measure the bottom wire on your other petals to see how long you need to make this one. I usually just eyeball it, but you do want that to be, you don't want to make this too long because you won't be able to shorten it later. All right, and then I can just wrap this third petal. Alright, so I've just finished off my third petal and I've double wrapped that working wire below. And now I should have one single wire sticking out of the bottom of my little petal unit. And then I can cut all of my little top wires and then fold them to the back of each leaf. Now obviously split basic frame, because there's only one little stem wire at the bottom, is going to be best for very small or possibly medium-sized little petals or leaves, kind of depending on what you're making. Next up in my intermediate techniques series is going to be the loop back, so make sure that you are subscribed to my channel and hit that bell icon so you get a notification the next time that I post.